everyone to DBI 101. Hopefully that's what you came here for. You're in the right place. I'm Kat Merkel. I am a technical assistant for NCII, and I've been with the center for about 2 years. So through the center, I work with states on DBI implementation, and I also work on our products team developing some of the products that we'll share with you today and all of the products that are on our website. So I'm joined with Caitlin, my colleague, and so I'll let Caitlin introduce herself.
Thanks, Kat. Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you here today. I've been with NCII since 2020, and in my role as a research, translation, and capacity building specialist, I spend a lot of my time taking some of the technical aspects related to interventions or assessments and figuring out the best ways we can translate that highly technical information to a variety of audiences. So I will be in the background here today, putting some links in the chat with resources, helping answer some questions. So if you need us, you can ask Kat or ask me in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Caitlin. So to get us started, there are going to be a few opportunities for engagement today. And since we can't see or hear you, that means we're going to ask you to respond in the chat a few times. And we ask that you do. We're a little bit of a small group here. So I think we can get a little casual here in the chat. So in one word, or if you're feeling spicy and you want to use an emoji, put in the chat something that represents how your body feels after sitting all day. And if you don't know how to use an emoji, you can go to your chat and click, there's like a smiley face in the upper right. I'm going to put one in right now. Let's see. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of people using emojis. Yay. Sluggish, sore, delirious. Yeah. I'm seeing, oh, someone has like a wacky face. I would love to hear more about what that means. Here, I see a lot of melting faces. I totally get that. I'm sitting right now and I'm like, why? I don't know. I guess I could stand. Okay, great. Thank you all for your participation. This is relevant, I promise, because throughout this webinar, I thought we could ground the steps of DBI in a real life and maybe even relatable experience to you all. So I really struggled and still do with back pain. In December 2023, I began experiencing some minor pain. It was uncomfortable while sitting, but not debilitating or anything like that. But I would ache after work, and I would sometimes struggle to walk long distances. So throughout our hour together, I'm going to walk you through how this experience really mirrors the 5 steps of data-based individualization. But first, let me share today's objectives. So in this session, we're going to introduce intensive intervention delivered through database individualization, or DBI. And today's webinar is really to provide high-level overview of DBI. We're not going to get too deep into the different steps of DBI and the specifics, but it's really intended for people who are just starting out with DBI and people who are looking to explore our website or access some of our resources that we're going to provide you with today. So throughout the webinar, feel free to submit questions using our Q&A feature. You'll see on your little tab where you know, it has the chat and the participants, all that. You might have to click more if your window is small, and then it should say Q&A. So submit your questions through the Q&A feature, or if you can't find it, that's fine. Feel free to submit it through the chat. We won't have any handouts specifically for this webinar, but we will be putting in some links to different resources that we mentioned, and Caitlin will also provide a link to the slides too. So if you want to take these home or follow along, you can do that as well. All right, so we'll get started. Why do we need intensive intervention? Despite our best efforts and the growing body of evidence-based practices, 3 to 5% of students still need more help than typical validated programs provide. So those students with intensive needs often require 10 to 30 times as much practice as their peers, and they're often facing co-occurring academic and behavioral challenges. Intensive intervention is really intended for that small percentage of students with severe and persistent learning and behavioral needs. So that 3 to 5% of students. And this includes students with disabilities, students with low academic achievement or high behavior intensity, and those who are not responsive to Tier 2. And the decision to move a student directly to an intensive intervention should really be made on an individual and case-by-case basis. And in most cases, data should be collected over time to help demonstrate that the student's low achievement or behavioral challenges are significant and persistent, right? So this isn't a one-time thing, but we use data to determine that this is significant and persistent. And we approach this with DBI, or database individualization. DBI is a systematic method for using data to determine when and how to individualize and intensify intervention for students with severe and persistent learning or behavioral needs. It's grounded in experimental teaching research, and it integrates those evidence-based interventions, assessments, and strategies. So in reality, DBI is that technical term for what many good teachers are already doing, what they're naturally doing through the problem-solving process. So that's frequently reviewing student data and making changes to their teaching based on what works for students. DBI, however, really makes that process systematic. It's explicit, it's tailored to students' needs, and through that multi-step process, that gradually intensifies instruction and support. One question you might have is, can I do DBI by myself? Do I need a team? Although we can implement DBI as individual teachers, we really recommend, when possible, using a team-based approach. So since 3 or more heads are usually better than 1 when engaging in problem solving. So the DBI process has these 5 iterative steps. We have validated intervention program delivered with fidelity. We're going to touch on, what these all mean and what fidelity means. And then we have progress monitoring, right? We need to know, is our intervention working? If a student is responsive to the intervention, it's working, then we use that right gray arrow and we keep doing what we're doing. If they're non-responsive, we need to figure out why. So we move to that 3rd step, diagnostic data, to develop a hypothesis. And once we figure out what our hypothesis is, we develop an adaptation to our intervention to try to address that need. And again, we continue progress monitoring for those adaptations to make sure that the student is responding to the intervention. And if they're not, we go back up to that step 3 for diagnostic data. And it's really an ongoing process. Throughout today, we're going to touch very high level on each of these steps and provide some resources and really ground those in our back pain scenario. So this first step lays the foundation for DBI, and it starts with that validated intervention program. And this could also be that specially designed instruction documented in the IEP for students with disabilities. But what do we mean by standardized? A standardized intervention uses research-based instructional programs. It's not just some random thing we found off the street, but it provides a specific manner to students and typically includes a step-by-step sequence. And as we think about our validated interventions, we need to consider 2 elements. First, the interventions should be designed based on a key set of dimensions. And second, the intervention should be conducted with fidelity. You're going to hear me say that word a bunch of times throughout this hour, fidelity, right? So in other words, we need to know what we're going to implement and how we're going to implement it. For each step, again, we're going to bring it back to this back pain example, and I'm going to ask for your help in the chat. So remember, I was dealing with some minor back pain, some achiness after each workday. So in the chat, take 30 seconds to answer. If you were me, how would you decide which treatment to try first for something common like general back pain? Google it. Yes, I love that. Stretching, maybe a massage, or I saw Motrin, or maybe it's like Tylenol, something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I see someone says that what works for most. I love that answer. Obviously, you do a little bit of research to figure out what that is. But I did begin with a standardized evidence-based approach. So knowing that, what someone said, what works for most, these are common treatments for back pain. I started with over-the-counter medication and physical therapy. And I ensured that my physical therapy plan was tailored to my specific needs. And that mirrors the DBI principle of starting with a validated intervention program aligned to the problem. Right? I'm not going to just do some random PT. I'm going to do something that's aligned to the problem. I see someone says like lower back stretching. Maybe look into MRI testing. Yeah, maybe we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll see. I see some people maybe have some relatable experiences to me. And like my medicine and physical therapy, a validated intervention program in education should also be evidence-based, targeted to the skill, like how I did PT for my lower back and not my upper back, or even like something like my arms, right? And delivered with fidelity. In my example, fidelity would mean, did I do my exercises right? And did I do them consistently? Did I show up to PT and did I try at PT, right? But why do we start with standardized evidence-based programs? Some people already alluded to this in the chat, but one, they are effective. When properly aligned to the student's needs, they tend to work. They are efficient, so teachers can plan instruction for groups rather than individuals. They're consistent, and they can be easy to deliver. So many only require a little bit of training to deliver them, and they can be cost effective, right? Several relatively inexpensive options exist. And using my analogy, most people with back pain will get better using over-the-counter medications and PT. So we start with that. And when a group of students or a student is not making adequate progress, we have to start by examining fidelity, that magic word. Fidelity of implementation refers to the extent to which the intervention is delivered as planned. So fidelity data are important because they allow us to rule out inconsistent implementation as a potential cause for a student's lack of progress. And we have two important questions. One, did we deliver the intervention as planned? And did the student receive the intervention? Were they present? Were they engaged? And there are different ways to assess fidelity. Validated interventions may include fidelity checklists to allow educators to document the delivery of specific intervention components, but teams may also collect data on adherence to the intervention plan using tools such as our student intervention implementation log. So Caitlin will put a link to that in the chat, but this is available on our website. And we chose our intervention, and now the second step of DBI is progress monitoring. So this step involves the development of a progress monitoring plan that outlines the measure that will be used, the frequency, how often are we going to collect data? Where did we start? What's the baseline? And where do we want to go? We need to establish an ambitious goal for our student. And so the goal of this step is to really understand, did our intervention work? And so we want to know, how do you know if something is working? In the chat, again, take 30 seconds. How do you know if the intervention, or in my case for back pain, my physical therapy was working? If you feel better, data shows improvement, less pain. Give everyone a couple more seconds. Yeah, I see some DBI pros in the chat, but the main thing is, yeah, is our data showing that we're improving? And that's what this progress monitoring step is all about. Someone just guessed it, but yeah, I ended up rating my pain scale every day. And my goal was to sit through the workday with less than a 2 out of 10 on the pain scale. So I set a clear and ambitious goal, and then I tracked my progress through regular self-assessments. So I noted my pain levels, mobility, overall well-being. And so something that we often get confused, or we hear folks getting confused, is the difference between monitoring progress and progress monitoring. And they're not the same. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to read this slide. And if you're able, and reflect in the chat, what is the difference that you see here between monitoring progress and progress monitoring? It's no trick question. What's the main difference between monitoring progress and progress monitoring? It's in those first bullets on each box. Yeah, I'm seeing it come in. Yeah, definitely. So I see informal versus standardized. That's the main difference between monitoring progress and progress monitoring. And they're both really important. But the reason we kind of talk about both of these is so, we level set in this setting. We know what we mean when I say progress monitoring. So monitoring progress on the left is a critical part of instruction. It includes those informal checks for understanding that, that teachers use throughout instruction for all students. So this might be quizzes, it might be using responses on whiteboards or exit tickets. And those are strategies for teachers to make those real-time instructional decisions. Progress monitoring on the right is a standardized process. So that means we have to have a valid and reliable tool and data collected at regular intervals depending on the intensity of intervention. So maybe that's weekly, right? And then the data has to be graphed so we can make informed decisions on that data. In practice, teachers are doing both of these things. And I was doing both of these things to monitor my back pain as well. Informally monitoring the progress of the entire class and gathering progress monitor data for a subset of those students receiving interventions. And we have to, before we start progress monitoring, choose a progress monitoring measure. Progress monitoring tools should have the characteristics shown here. The first, brief and easy to administer. We know you're all busy, you have so much to do in the day. You don't need an hour-long progress monitoring measure. So some progress monitoring tools take as little as just a few minutes to administer, whereas others can take longer. So be sure to consider the ease of administration when you select a tool. 2, able to be used repeatedly across time. Progress monitoring for intensive intervention should occur at least weekly. Making sure that the tool you select can be used repeatedly is really important. So for academics, that means having multiple forms of equal difficulty or using a computer adaptive format. 3, sensitive to changes in student performance. So measures should really capture those small changes in student performance. In other words, when a student is learning a new skill, the student score should reflect that change and measure that change. And then you've heard this one before in the previous slide, but valid, reliable, and evidence-based. There should be evidence for the reliability and validity of the progress monitoring tool when used with students with intensive needs. And so now you've chosen your measure. Now what do? Right? We collected our data. And as you can see in this DBI graphic, frequently collecting, graphing, and analyzing progress monitoring data occurs at the second step and the fifth step of the DBI process. And that's really informing our decisions about student responsiveness to the validated intervention program. And so after we collect data, we have to graph and analyze them. Here's an example of an academic progress monitoring graph. Behavior graphs will look a little different. The horizontal or x-axis of a progress monitoring graph typically includes the number of weeks of instruction. In this example, it's months. The vertical or y-axis typically includes the score or value of the progress monitoring assessment. So maybe that's words read correctly or number of problems answered correctly. And we graph to help us visualize the trends and make timely decisions. It's a lot easier to make a decision and visualize a trend looking at a graph versus just a bunch of numbers in an Excel file. So let's break down these different parts of the graph so we know what we're looking at. The baseline, that's our starting score, and that's with the red star. So that's where our student is starting from. The goal is our desired score at the end of the instructional period. So where do we want our student to be in XYZ amount of weeks? And that's that green star. The goal line is the line connecting the baseline and the goal. So that's like in an ideal world, that's the pattern or that's the trend your data will follow. And each blue dot represents the student score on the progress monitoring probe. The trend line is a line through the scores that visually represents the student's actual performance based on the data you collected. And that's that solid red line. And finally, the phase line appears as that vertical dashed line, and that's used to illustrate a change. So in this case, it would be when we started our intervention. And your graph may have multiple phase lines, depending on how many adaptations you had. And that's just to know, okay, this is when I made a change, so we can know what we're looking at and when the data trends might change. And as noted earlier, most progress monitoring systems will include a graphing feature that will graph your data across time for you. But if you don't have that, you can also graph data by hand or using our NCII Excel graphing tool that, that Caitlin put in the chat. And I graphed my back pain too. So one thing to note here is that for my graph, the goal is to lower something, i.e. my back pain. And that's really common in behavior progress monitoring, right? You're trying to reduce the amount of instances of that behavior maybe. Whereas in academic progress monitoring, like we just looked at, the goal is to increase something, right? Increase the correct words per minute or something like that. And you can see initially here, my physical therapy helped. You could see from that red star after the first 2 weeks, my pain was going down. And then the pain worsened and began radiating down my leg. I kept going with the PT for 4 more weeks to see, if that would change anything, kept trying. And then after 8 weeks, I decided I'm in so much pain. It's time for a change. It's time to try something else. Which brings us to step 3. Why didn't the intervention work? First, as a caveat, maybe the intervention did work, right? I don't want to assume that the intervention will never work and the student is always going to be non-responsive. They might have been responsive here, in which case you continue progress monitoring. For students who are not responsive to the validated intervention program, the team uses diagnostic data to develop a hypothesis about why the student isn't responding. Diagnostic data may also be used to understand a student's specific skill deficits and strengths to identify maybe the environmental effects that predict and maintain that student's problem behavior. Educators use the diagnostic data to develop a hypothesis. And we know that from science class, a hypothesis is really the best way to guess for why something might be occurring based on the evidence we have available. But it also needs to be something we can test. So within the DBI process, the hypothesis is really driving the team's decision about how to best support the student and adapt the intervention. There are a few different ways to collect diagnostic data. Maybe it's more formal through standardized tools, but there's also informal approaches such as error analyses, or even just talking to the people in the student's life. Interviews are also a way to collect diagnostic data. So let's see if we can think of a hypothesis for my back. In the chat, take 30 seconds to answer. If a treatment isn't working, what would we want to know before trying something new? Yeah, see, is there an injury? Are there new symptoms? If the treatment was done with fidelity, you guys are pros. Yeah, that's exactly what I want to know. Fidelity. Did I complete my physical therapy program with fidelity? Which means, did I do my exercises right? Did I go every week? Did I stay consistent? Did I go for long enough, right? So I did it with fidelity. I tried so hard, and we can rule out any fidelity issues, right? I was consistent there. And I saw someone else say, any new symptoms? Yeah, we want to know if there are new symptoms, because maybe that'll indicate we need to align my intervention to a different need, right? So I actually did have new symptoms, which you couldn't see in my graph. So the graph showed my pain worsen, but it didn't show why. So what the graph didn't show is I had new pain running down my leg, right? I had burning pain all the way down through my foot. And so using informal data, which was the increased pain in my leg, I hypothesized that this could be a nerve issue. So I collected more data to confirm my hypothesis. I saw some other folks say this earlier, but I talked with the doctor and they said this could be a nerve issue and PT would not help with that likely. And so we got an MRI, which is a more formal use of diagnostic data, to confirm that I did have herniated discs pushing on my nerve. So that really validated the need for a more intensive intervention and just a completely different intervention aligned to that need, right? Oops, wrong way. All right, so when collecting diagnostic data, we like to use this analogy of a goldfish. It's something everyone can sort of relate to. If you have a sick goldfish, what reasons might you consider for it being sick? Take 30 seconds in the chat to answer. What could be the reason that our fish is sick? Yeah, water issues, a lot of overfeeding. You know, we've had some fishy friends die in this chat for people. I feel you. One time my friend's cat ate my fish, so that was really tragic. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of water's dirty, fishing, or feeding issues, lonely. Yeah, that's a big one. So if a goldfish isn't thriving, we usually ask questions about its environment, its food, its tank conditions. We don't blame the fish. And to relate it back to the back pain analogy, back pain typically doesn't occur in isolation to your environment. So for example, with my back pain, you wouldn't just say, that's just how Kat's back is, right? There's nothing we can do about it. And especially when I was in so much pain, that is not what you want to hear. And so we want to consider what we could do to adapt and decrease the pain. And similarly, when students struggle, we should really consider factors that we can control, like instruction, curriculum, and environment, rather than blaming the student, right? And so when thinking about our students, we have these three variables: instruction, curriculum, environment. Instruction, meaning we have to examine if our instruction is explicit, is it well-paced, offers opportunities to respond and get feedback, and is it engaging? For curriculum, we want to ensure that it matches the student's needs and teaches the right skills at the right level. And environment, focusing on clear expectations and positive interactions. The goal is really here to balance all three of these things to meet the learner's needs and adjusting these factors to ensure their success. And so if we establish that the student is not responsive to the intervention and other students receiving the intervention are responsive, and we know there's no fidelity issues here, what's our next step? Well, we want to review our progress monitoring data and our intervention data to develop an initial hypothesis for why the student is not making adequate progress, right? So we're going to use what we already have to make an initial hypothesis. Then we want to collect informal diagnostic data matched to our hypothesis and use this to confirm our hypothesis or identify a different hypothesis. And using that, we want to adapt the intervention to match the database hypothesis. And here we have a few scenarios, and for each scenario on the left, the questions on the right provide a possible starting point for the diagnostic data process. In this way, educators can use existing progress monitoring data to identify the focus area. So again, that's instruction, curriculum, environment, that is most likely related to the challenges. So for example, if a student is making little to no progress, you might want to see if there's a mismatch between the need that the student has and the skills being taught, right? Do you have the right intervention program? If they're making progress, but not enough, you would want to see if the student has enough opportunities to respond. Or maybe if the student is making progress, but really having trouble making progress in other settings outside of the interventions that transfer, you might want to consider teaching generalization or investigating if there are any behavioral issues in those other settings. And so obviously there's a lot of things that you could do to alter your intervention. And these questions are really just to start you off. It's just a starting point, and there might be multiple reasons that a student is experiencing challenges. But identifying that focus area can help us narrow down our possible actions, right? So we need to then select data sources that really are related to that identified focus. So the instruction, curriculum, or environment. So for example, when focusing on curriculum, you might want to analyze errors in student work or informative assessments and comparing the students' errors to the skills included on the intervention curriculum. If you're focusing on instruction, you could conduct an observation of the teacher's use of effective instructional practices. Or if you're focusing on environment, you could do observations of the classroom environment to learn more about the classroom management, or maybe even interviews with individuals who know the student well and can provide information on that identified focus. And so these data sources all provide information that help us ensure our hypothesis is accurate, meaning, do we have evidence to support our hypothesis? And as you consider why a student is not responding, it's really important to consider that intersection between academics and behavior. We know that students who struggle often use escape or avoidance behaviors to delay or remove a task they're struggling with. And then the student misses instruction and then they fall behind, right? It's all connected. So you have to look comprehensively at the academic, social, emotional, and behavioral factors that can help you generate a hypothesis that looks really more comprehensively at the student's needs. All right. Once we have our hypothesis developed, the team then brainstorms possible adaptations to address the hypothesis. So I confirmed my hypothesis that I had a nerve issue through that MRI, right? And PT is not going to treat it, at least not right now, right? Maybe I didn't start PT soon enough. In the chat, respond, what can I do to change the intervention now, according to my new hypothesis? There's not one right answer here. Yeah, I'm seeing research other options, talk to your doctor, use the new existing data, definitely. Yes, see a chiropractor, maybe, right? Gotta look into these options. Yeah, so I had to use this new data, right? And according to the new data, I talked with my doctor, and they said that I should probably get some spinal injections to target the nerve pain more directly. And so, again, different interventions work for different people. And they said, at this point, at this stage in your pain, this is the next step that people typically go to, right? So the spinal injections, it's a little bit more intense than your PT, and it's going to be more aligned to your problem. And the doctor said I would know whether it works within 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks, I'll sort of have an idea of like, is my pain decreasing or staying the same or even maybe getting worse? For students, we have the taxonomy of intervention intensity that can be used to guide the adaptation of intensification of an intervention. And so there are 7 dimensions. We have strength, dosage, alignment, attention to transfer, comprehensiveness, behavioral academic support, and individualization. Caitlin very nicely put this resource in the chat so you can learn more about the specific dimensions. I'll pull out a couple of them. So dosage, that second one, that's the number of opportunities a student has to respond and receive feedback from a teacher. That's something that we can adapt, right, or intensify. We can give more opportunities to respond. If you'll remember at the beginning of the presentation, I told you students with intensive needs need those like 10 to 30 times more opportunities to practice. Or alignment, that's that third one. How well the intervention matches the targeted academic skills or behaviors of concern. And so are we targeting the right thing? So for me, we had to better align my intervention because now we had to target my nerve pain, right? Not my general just back achiness. So these dimensions are there to help you kind of hone in on some different things that you can adapt or intensify. Here are some examples. Depending on which dimension you think you need to adapt, there's a few different options. And this is not, all the options in the world, but these are just some starting points. So for example, if you think there's a mismatch between the skills needed and the skills being taught, it happens more often than you think, then we're looking at adapting the alignment. That's the one I just talked about with my back. And so what you might want to do is increase the instructional time for the targeted skills, or maybe even just use a different program that better addresses the student's need. Let's say the dosage is not sufficient. You would want to try increasing the opportunities to respond, remembering that those students need 10 to 30 times more time to practice. And this entire menu might be overwhelming. So if you just start with your hypothesis, which is, on that left, those green boxes, that can really help narrow down your options. So your hypothesis is taking, wow, I have all of these different things I could change, and helping you say, okay, actually, let's just start with alignment. I think there's a mismatch between the skills needed and the skills being taught. You can find this slide in the PDF of the slides that are posted, and I'll have Caitlin just send a link to that again in the chat. But yeah, I agree. This is a really great slide. And we have another presentation on diagnostic data that even goes more into depth on this slide. And I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. And so once your adaptations are made, the teams should document them within an individual intervention plan. Because when implementing the adapted plan, it's really important for teams to consider fidelity and implement the plan as intended. I'm a broken record with that. So NCII provides an intervention plan template to assist with the planning and documentation. And Caitlin will put a link to that in the chat. We already shared that first one earlier in the presentation. So here is that second one. While implementing the intervention adaptations, we continue to collect progress monitoring data at regular intervals to determine responsiveness. So we're at DBI step 5 now, people. Students whose data indicate responsiveness, we continue the adaptation, right? So maybe it's working and we just keep doing what we're doing. But for students whose data indicate non-response, the team returns to that diagnostic data step, right? You see that gray arrow going back to diagnostic data, and the teacher will analyze additional data and consider any additional adaptations. And so when thinking about this, we want to consider, are the data collected according to plan? And does the graph indicate when adaptations were made? So, for example, you can see in my graph, I have that second phase line now where I started my spinal injections. So I continued tracking my symptoms, and unfortunately, my injections did not help at all. They actually made the pain worse. So I was at a 10 out of 10 pain every day, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't sit down, couldn't stand up. It was a lose-lose situation for me. And so this ongoing progress monitoring was really critical in determining that my plan was ineffective. It was also helpful that my doctor said within 2 weeks, I would kind of know whether or not this intervention worked, because that gave me sort of a good time frame where I wasn't just sitting in this pain forever. Unfortunately, in real life, I sort of was sitting in this pain forever because it was hard to get to next steps. But ideally, I knew after 2 weeks that I have to start making a different plan. So I went back to DBI step 3, our diagnostic data, and I tried again. So after further consultation, I escalated the intervention and I got back surgery. Again, so this is after, honestly, months of going back and forth with my doctors. It's not a decision you make lightly. And the decision, though, aligned with our DBI emphasis on increasing intensity when needed to ensure the intervention is effective and sustainable. And so it's important to remember DBI is an ongoing process. It's not like you go through these 5 steps and you're done. It's really based on the student responsiveness to the intervention. And once I reach my increased goals, I can begin to fade my supports, right? So I won't be getting this intervention forever, ideally. And so post-surgery, I saw immediate improvement, though I still have some numbness in my leg. I resumed progress monitoring and added post-op PT and daily stretching. in the chat, I think this is our last chat. Why would I keep progress monitoring after the surgery seems to be initially effective? So I woke up from surgery and I was like, I feel amazing. So why would I keep progress monitoring after that? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of great answers. Just to make sure like that pain isn't coming back, to make sure it's sustainable, right? So maybe what happens if it works for the first week and then my pain comes back, right? I want to keep progress monitoring, especially since I'm not at full recovery yet, right? Post operation, I'm not at benchmark, to put in academic terms, but I've raised my goals. So now that I can sit with a 2 out of 10 pain, right? That was my original goal. Now my goals are I want to run again. I want to touch my toes. I want to be able to regain full mobility. So I continue to progress monitor and I adjust as needed. So maybe, in 6 months, I don't need to go to PT every week. I could go like once a month, right? And so that's the same thing with our students, right? We can begin to fade our supports, just ensuring that that initial problem or that extreme pain, in my case, does not come back. All right, we've thrown a lot at you today. In addition to the resources that we shared already, here are 3 resources we'll put in the chat so you can learn more about DBI at home. The first one breaks down all of these steps that we just went over. And the second one provides a page in resources on each of the steps as well. That's our website. The third is a brand new resource. We talked a lot about developing hypotheses, and this brand new resource is really helpful in walking you through how to do that. It starts, with fidelity. It takes you through possible behavioral considerations and some common hypotheses that you would want to consider. So there are these and more on our website, which is intensiveintervention.org. Okay, it looks like we have about 10 minutes to get into some questions. So I will let Caitlin, if any questions came in through the chat or Q&A, feel free to throw them at me.
Thanks, Kat. Becky asked a question. I'll read it out loud and we can maybe tag team this answer. Becky said, when it comes, so back to the slide on monitoring progress versus progress monitoring. When it comes to progress monitoring, is it ever considered mastery learning for specific skills? There are some things that do not have psychometrically designed measures. Would you like to take that one or do you want me to tackle it, Kat?
Yeah, no, you can tackle that one.
Sure. I'm also going to put some links in the chat as well. We have 2 tools charts that do provide technical ratings and adequacy of academic and behavior progress monitoring tools. So if I'm understanding, Becky, your question correctly, it's really about that piece that makes that progress monitoring part formal, right? Where you need tools with high technical adequacy that are psychometrically designed for this. And you're right, there are some skills, especially I come from the world which we are thinking about student behavior. We might not have as many, or we might not have options, right, that have been psychometrically validated. So for progress monitoring itself, it is important to find the most technically adequate tool you can and to use it consistently. 100%, Becky. We also, right, a lot of tools have been validated at the lower elementary level. So what we encourage individual teachers or districts or people at decision-making capacity is to select tools that have the highest likelihood of working, right? We don't want to kind of just create something to create it. If there's a validated tool and we can adapt it to use with our secondary population or for specific skills, we want to start there. And we also encourage, even with the tools that might be found on the tools chart or might be that have like psychometrically validated for some grade levels and not others, it's like really important just to understand the strengths and weaknesses so that you can kind of use it with that knowledge. And we often encourage that with some tools, we might want to kind of triangulate with some other sources of data as well, especially when we're making some decisions. And if I did not answer what you were asking, please let me know and I can try a different answer.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah. And I'm gonna well, I'll pause here to see if there's any other questions before when someone had messaged me separately. I'm gonna.
I will answer that
Mhm.
chat. So will all the links be emailed? I wasn't planning on it, but I could. If you pull up the link to these slides, all of the links are already embedded in these slides. So if you want to take home like all the links, click on these slides. But I can also, when I send out the recording to you all, I can send those too. I don't think we're planning on doing a certificate of completion, but I can double check with our folks.
Yeah, Amanda, if you want to email us, we can connect about that.
Yeah.
Kat, I had another question that someone had kind of messaged me that says,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thinking about DBI, their school uses MTSS or multi-tiered systems of support. So can you just kind of talk through kind of where DBI fits in within an MTSS model if schools are using that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're not familiar, MTSS is, a systems level model to get supports to students and match supports to students' needs. And so DBI really fits in that tier 3 level in the multi-tiered system of support. So that's the intensive intervention. And just over here at NCII, that's our approach to intensive intervention. But there are also ways you can use just the DBI process in your MTSS, let's say for tier 2. Even if it's not for intensive intervention, DBI is just a great problem solving model, right? So starting with something that works typically, and then progress monitoring and using data to make your decisions. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Obviously, in intensive intervention, we have all of those resources around how to intensify your supports and the taxonomy that I mentioned. But DBI and that problem solving kind of model can really be applied to almost anything. As you saw, I applied it to my back pain. Caitlin, if you want to follow up or anything I missed, feel free
No,
to.
I think that sounds great. And I will just kind of dovetail to another question that we received kind of within the registration process of thinking of
Mm-hmm.
DBI specific to behavior intervention. So, the DBI process does work across a wide range of academic, behavior, socio-emotional interventions. And so the whole process that we went through today can be applied when you're thinking through kind of the lens of implementing an academic intervention or intensifying that, and you infuse the behavior supports within that. And you can also use this same process when solely focused on the implementation of a behavior intervention. I think maybe some areas and pieces where it is different is that we have a little bit smaller of a list, right, of progress monitoring tools that have been psychometrically validated. So there's a little bit more flexibility in that realm. And then also when we're thinking about the graphs for behavior, we often don't think of behavior in terms of a trend line that we're mapping to norms by grade level or some sort of national benchmarking. And they're kind of the graphing part is the same as we would for academics and what you showed, but the graph would be more similar to that
Mm-hmm.
graph you did and you pointed out for the back pain where we kind of have a goal line and then we're comparing our data to that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin.
Great. Yes, Julie, our recording will be available after this webinar. Once we go through that and get the transcription and the captioning, we will post that on the website. Any other questions from folks?
While people think of questions, I will just transition us to talking about some other cool things that are happening. If you want to learn more about progress monitoring, we have a webinar coming up on September 25th. And if you want to be up to date on all our events, go to our website. Caitlin, if you want to put that in the chat, and just scroll to the bottom of our website and you can sign up for our newsletter. So as soon as registration drops for that academic progress monitoring next week, you can sign up. We also have workshops, which are a little bit more hands-on than this webinar was. If you want a little bit more practice, you can attend our workshops that are coming up in October and again in the spring. And finally, just thank you so much for coming. We'll stay on if folks have some questions, but please fill out this survey. We want to hear from you. We use this data to improve all of our events. You can scan the code or click on that link that Caitlin just sent in the chat.